Hello and welcome to Men Behind the Stats, a new series from BAM Football. We'll be analysing your opinions by digging deeper into the stats. So, let's get into the video. And today's opinion is that Pogba and Bruno Fernandes can't play together for Manchester United. This was sent in by @TheFergusonCode on Twitter, so thank you very much for your opinion. If you're watching and you've got something you want to see in a future video, send it to us at BAM Football on Twitter or Instagram. So we'll be looking at their attacking output versus the best in the league. We'll be using this to work out their best positions. And finally, we'll look at their defensive output, looking at pairings that United could possibly play to ensure that United are secure both in defence and able to excel on the front foot going forward. Now, to start off the video, we've got this graph here on chance creation and playmaking. Now, as usual, all stats are per 90 minutes. And going up the graph here, we've got key passes. Along the bottom, we've got passes into the penalty area. Now, passes into the penalty area, I think, is a useful stat for comparing attacking midfielders because the attacking midfielders normally occupy a position outside the box, and the position they want to be getting the ball is to create chances for the forwards inside the penalty area, where the ball's closer to goal and therefore the chances are generally easier to score. So, key passes are passes that lead directly to a shot, and that's going up the graph. By combining these stats over the course of a season, for me, it shows who is and who isn't a good playmaker. So, important things to note from the graph. Firstly, Bruno's stats come from his time at United so far, so it's not been the most games, but it shows an improvement already on Pereira and Lingard. With Pogba, he's not played for most of the season, so I've used his 18-19 season stats, and in that season, he played mainly as a box-to-box midfielder with a defensive midfielder behind him. Given where Pogba played in that season, the first thing you notice is where he is on that graph. Pogba clearly excels in this deeper role, being able to receive the ball facing goal and using his power to drive forwards at the opposition, rather than being forced to play on the half turn. As a result, there is really no need for him to play further forward, and it's been suggested he plays in the number 10 role, but there's absolutely no need for that to happen in my opinion. Something else you can see from the graph is the step up Bruno's already brought into Manchester United. He's clearly far above Lingard and Pereira in both of those creative stats, so he's already a massive improvement, and he's not played that many games yet. So as he plays more games, with a fit Marcus Rashford in front of him, a fit Paul Pogba alongside him, and a fit Anthony Martial playing up top as well, you'd expect his stats to only improve. Given Bruno's already unleashed this improvement from playing in the number 10 role, it makes absolutely no sense to move him away from this role. So from my perspective, Bruno has to stay in that number 10 role and be allowed to fully improve his game, fully integrate into the team, and show that he is one of the best attacking midfielders in the world. Another key part of his game is that he likes to roam and find space, wherever it is on the pitch. Now, his movement in itself creates space for other players, and that's sometimes harder to see from the stats, but it's nonetheless an important part of his game to be aware of. Moving on, something else interesting that's occurred since Bruno's joined United is the number of points gained where United's expected goals is less than the expected goals of the opposition. In other words, the expected goals against. If we look at the season before Bruno joined, where United had positive expected goals minus expected goals against, as in situations where you'd expect United to win the game, the form in those games was 8 wins, 4 draws and 5 losses. So clearly that indicates poor finishing and a team out of form, because they're not converting their chances and therefore losing games that they should be winning. That's the positive goals. If you look now at the negative, before Bruno joined, the form in those games was 1 win, 2 draws and 3 losses. So 4 points were taken from the situation where United had a worse expected goal return than their opponents. Now, since Bruno joined United, that situation has changed. Admittedly, there's only been 3 games where this has occurred, but United have taken 4 points from those 3 games, which is the same amount as they took in the whole rest of the season where this situation occurred. So clearly, since Bruno's joined, there's been a massive uptick in form, in finishing, and therefore in goal return and point return for the team. Whilst maybe not the most useful stat in and of itself, it does show that Bruno has made a significant difference in terms of the points that the team have been able to drag out of games, suggesting that the finishing has improved. And one key component of finishing is the confidence of the strikers in front of goal. So maybe with Bruno joining the team, their confidence is higher and therefore their finishing is better. That offers a little look into the psychological side of football as well as the physical, statistical side. The final thing I want to say on their attacking game is a little look at this shot creating actions chart. So this shows how many shot creating actions each player made per 90 minutes on average. And what you can see straight away, Bruno obviously a fairly significant improvement on Pereira and Lingard. But what you can also see is, again, Paul Pogba is up there with the very best in the division, playing as a box-to-box midfielder, as he did in the 18-19 season. So it's very clear from this that to produce the attacking output that United desperately need, Pogba and Bruno have got to play together. Comparing their numbers to De Bruyne and David Silva, they're not far off Manchester City, who are one of the best attacking teams in the world. So clearly, with them both playing together in the same team, a fully fit Marcus Rashford and Anthony Martial, hopefully next season the signing of Jadon Sancho, United's attacking prowess should go from strength to strength and should be up there with the best in the world. Now that we've looked at the attacking output from both Pogba and Bruno, with Pogba best in the box-to-box midfield role and Bruno best in the number 10 position, it's important to look at the defensive output that we can get to make sure that by playing Pogba and Bruno together, United aren't putting themselves at risk defensively. So now, obviously there's a lot of information on this chart, there's a lot of different pairings, but the point of this chart is to show the different pairings United have got and how they compare to the best in the league defensively. This chart compares the two biggest defensive contributors in the midfield for each team against each other. So obviously for City, that's Rodri and De Bruyne, since De Bruyne seems to track back a lot more than David Silva. And for Liverpool, that'll be Fabinho and Henderson. Obviously for Leicester, that's Wilfred Ndidi and Yuri Tielemans. Maddison normally gets the freer role to track back a little bit less defensive responsibility. And at Chelsea, that's Kante and Jorginho. As you'd expect, since everyone knows Kante is an absolute workhorse in defence, a complete beast, he and Jorginho are the top of the charts. Wilfred Ndidi also a monster in defence, not too far off alongside Yuri Tielemans. As usual, I've adjusted these defensive actions for possession so that the impact of teams like City having a lot more possession than other teams are negated in the stats to the best extent I can. Now for me, the first thing to note on this graph is that in terms of the total defensive actions per 90 minutes, there's not actually too much variation in the league. So that's in terms of how high up the pairings are on the graph. So obviously Rodri and De Bruyne and Pogba and Matic are a little bit lower, but the rest seem to be within a fairly small cluster, apart from, I guess, Kante and Jorginho, who are a little bit above that. So in terms of total defensive action, there isn't actually too much variation. So applying that to the United midfield, that suggests that all the possible combinations on this graph for playing in that double pivot are possibly viable options. There's no situation in which, in terms of that stat, United will be left much worse off than their competition. So if we now look at the pressures attempted, this obviously depends more on the team's play style. So if a team likes to restrict counter-attacks and get up in the opposition's face, then there's going to be more pressures from midfield. The midfielders are going to get up in the opposition's face more, try and either win the ball back straight away high up the pitch, or they'll try and foul the opposition and kill the transition. For me, that's why City's midfield is a lot higher than the likes of Matic and McTominay, Pogba and McTominay, or Pogba and Matic, because Matic is quite static, whereas now Rodri is fairly static, but he does get up and try and restrict the transition much more than Nemanja Matic does, and Kevin De Bruyne is very good at this as well, so that's why their pressure is so much higher. Obviously, this is a really key part of Liverpool's game, so Fabinho and Henderson being so high up in the pressure stat shows this again. Henderson's a workhorse, Fabinho is also very good at pressing the opposition, and a key part of Liverpool's game plan is to stop the transitions and stop opposition having the counter-attacks. So that really comes through in this stat. Now, obviously Fred, all combinations involving Fred are very high in terms of pressures attempted. There is something to bear in mind with this, however, in that whilst Fred attempts a lot of pressures per game, he does get dribbled past an awful lot. There are a lot of implications of this, one of the most important being that if Fred were to get dribbled past and he was playing alongside Pogba in the double pivot, you'd leave Pogba on his own defensively. Now, in terms of winning a one-on-one, Pogba's more than capable of doing it, but in terms of covering ground to make up passes and blocking passes, Pogba probably isn't the best at doing that. So maybe, in actual fact, United want someone who's less willing to roam out of position and someone who's more able to be static and screen the defence properly. In that sense, for me, the choice has got to come down to being either McTominay or Nemanja Matic to partner Paul Pogba. Ultimately, from this point, it's simply up to which player Ole would prefer to partner Paul Pogba with. Personally, If Ole's going to go with the double pivot, I think Scott McTominay is the ideal option. At the start of the season, McTominay and Pogba looked like they had a great partnership, and they have a good sense of when one goes forward, the other one sits back, and they're more than capable of covering each other. Also, both of them are big and good physical presences, so they're good at winning duels. So for me, I think McTominay would be the best partner in the double pivot. However, if Ole plays a different midfield structure, with one deep-lying defensive midfielder supporting two box-to-box midfielders in front of him, and Pogba and Bruno are those box-to-box midfielders, I think the defensive midfielder in that situation would have to be Nemanja Matic, because you need someone in that situation, when you've got the box-to-box midfielders roaming, you need someone who's going to stay in their position and be there reliably in front of the defence all the time. And Nemanja Matic is much better suited to that role than Scott McTominay. Essentially, what it comes down to is that McTominay and Matic are different types of players. McTominay is a lot closer to what Pogba offers in terms of his play style, whereas Matic is a different type of defensive midfielder. He's much more static and is probably better at screening the defence. So depending on the midfield system Ole employs, he's got to go with either Matic or McTominay accordingly. And since we're expecting him to go with a 4-2-3-1 and therefore a double pivot, Scott McTominay should be the answer to who plays alongside Paul Pogba. So, in summary, what we've seen in this video is that Paul Pogba and Bruno Fernandes can and should play together to get United's attack and their attacking output from midfield up to the level of the best midfields in the world. We've also shown that defensively, playing Pogba and Bruno together is viable, provided that Scott McTominay or Nemanja Matic are played alongside. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please do smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and do remember to send in your opinions to @BAMFootball on both Instagram and Twitter.